waitress.
Thank you, ladies. It's me great pleasure to introduce our profiler today, Sheena Lixon. She not only is the profiler today, Sheila organized this whole thing. Right?
Yay!
No detail left out. Now, Sheena says her life is in two parts. From birth, coming to Canada, and then Canada to the present. Today, she's going to speak about birth and coming to Canada. Canada to present mightn't be suitable for this occasion. However, we'll see what she's going to say. Here's Sheena.
Well, I can tell you what I would like right now, a big glass of Balvenie, the best. At least 14 years old. Or some of that drambuie that went into the haggis. Did you like the haggis?
Oh, excellent. Hey, oh! Woo-hoo!
Okay,
Very good.
you know, I think I lost 2 more pounds setting this up. I practiced this. I've hired Fraser LaChance to help me set this up. It's very good. We got it all perfect, got all the instructions. I practiced it at least 20 times at home, and I came here this morning and it would not work. And now it's got a mind of its own, so keep your fingers crossed because it'll be a pretty dreich presentation if I don't have these slides. There was a wee cooper who came 5, nickety nackety noo noo noo, and he has gotten a gentle wife. Hey willy wally hoo, John Goodle a ling for rashity roo roo roo.
Very good.
Okay, Scotland, I know you ladies like to travel, so I thought I'd do a little travel log for you, for those of you who haven't seen Scotland. All right, know the rock from which you were hewn, and the quarry from which you were cut. This is not a Robbie Burns quotation, but one from Isaiah. And this came up at a book club, I think it was Jane Tilley that brought it up, and it's open to all kinds of interpretations. I think really you're supposed to look at your religious background and so on, but I thought it was very appropriate to think about my roots. It makes me think of how does a person develop their character traits, their personality? And I really feel that mine was particularly related to my upbringing in Scotland. Hewn and carved out of a Scottish community. I would say the community would be the quarry and the family, the rock. This community that raised me. And my slideshow will take you on a short journey, to the time 1946 to 69, and the place is Fife in Scotland. Now, Robbie Burns didn't write much about Fife, and maybe once you see the slideshows, particularly where I lived, you'll understand why. There's nothing too much romantic about it, but he did state one. It was about a man. And it goes like this. There was a wee cooper who came 5, nickety nackety noo noo noo, and he has gotten a gentle wife. Hey willy wally hoo, John Goodle a ling for rashity roo roo roo.
Very good.
Okay, Scotland. I know you ladies like to travel, so I thought I'd do a little travel log for you, for those of you who haven't seen Scotland. And it's divided into 3 geographical divisions. There's the Northwest Highlands and the Grampians. They're up here. And then we've got the Central Lowlands, like here, and the Southern Uplands. Now, in the Northwest Highlands and the Grampians, they're mountainous, and not populated very much. And the mountain ranges go from 2,500 up to Ben Nevis, which is 4,400 feet. And if you do a Munro, which is what the climbers do, it has to be over 3,000, and a Corbett is 2,500 to 3,000 feet. The southern uplands are a little bit lower, and then, of course, there are the central lowlands, and this is where Fife is. Fife is this peninsula going right into the sea, and it has, and of course, I would come from the less picturesque, romantic part of it, wouldn't I? This is where most of the population in Scotland live, in these lowlands. The 2 main cities, Edinburgh and Edinburgh is here, and Glasgow is here, have most of the population, as well as Fife. There are 360,000 of us flying Fifers, and out of a total population of 5 million for Scotland. Originally, Fife, being in the lowlands, was really agricultural, but in the 18th century, with the development of industrialization, they discovered large coal seams and iron ore seams there. So we had steelworks, coal mines, railways, canals, made it very unpicturesque. It's a peninsula, and you access it from Edinburgh with the 4th Rail and Road Bridge on the south. And in the north from Dundee, you go from the 2 bridges. And then to the west are the Ochil Hills, and they just look like the escarpment that you see every day when you look out there. The topography of Fife, this is how it looks, and this one here is how it looked from my village. Now they do look higher than Blue Mountain, but you know they're the same height. The West Lowland, which is this one here, this West Lowland is 1,700 feet, and Blue Mountain is 1,400 feet. Now the only thing is that the base elevation of Blue Mountain is 740 feet, so you've only got a 700 feet drop, vertical drop, whereas in Scotland, my village was below sea level.
Ooh.
So you know that's why they look more like mountains, but they really aren't really any higher. And you know, when we were snowshoeing, on Sunday, a preview group, we went out to Highland Nordique. Absolutely amazing. You should come on the hike tomorrow. And when you look over there, from there down into Stainer, you could just be in Fife. You know, you could be on the Lomond Hills and looking down into the valley. You wouldn't get, well, this year they've got the snow, of course, but, and this is just like farmland. This is what you see. Okay, now there are picturesque parks in Fife. It's not all bleak. And of course, one of the most famous parks is St Andrews, the home of golf, and this is the Royal and Ancient Clubhouse. And the organisation there still oversees the rules of golf. And of course, that's on the coast. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. This is on the coast. It originally was fishing villages. Now there aren't too many fishing boats going out. And for the professional class from Edinburgh and the Lights, they have second properties here. There are a couple of villages, like Anstruther, that still have fishing fleets going out. Inland, there are some very historic, those of you who know, I did the historic tour of Collingwood this summer on the east side of Huron-Ontario with Francis Fraser. You'll know that I've got a real interest in buildings, and this is, you know, part of it is being surrounded by all this beautiful architecture. This town is just a little bit north of my village, and it's called Falkland, and there's Falkland Palace. This was a Stuart hunting lodge, and Mary Queen of Scots spent a lot of time there. And here are some people who like the architecture. You can see some of this. A lot of them have this distinctive vernacular Dutch and Crowstep gable architecture down the sides here, and these are all the laneways and so on. And of course, churches are abound. Beautiful, beautiful churches there. Okay, people that came from Fife, besides me. Famous today would be Ian Rankin, the murder mystery writer. He came from Cowdenbeath, which is even more bleak than the place I'm going to show you. And he wrote a lot about some of the towns I'll mention. And Gordon Brown went to my high school. Of course, he was a lot younger than me, and he was in the gifted class, which I was not. Famous Fifers in the past. We had Robert Adam, an architect, Adam Smith, the economist, and Adam Smith is we've got in Kirkcaldy, we've got the Adam Smith Halls and Adam Smith this and so on, and he's cited as the father of modern economics and capitalism. I don't know if we'll thank him for that or not. And also Andrew Carnegie, he's born in a town on the southwest of Fife, and in Dunfermline, and he went to Pittsburgh and he developed the steel industry in Pittsburgh. He was also a philanthropist, and all over the world, or certainly Europe and Canada and America, the States, there are Carnegie libraries. This is a picture of my retirement trip with my sister from Calgary. She works in the IT department in a Carnegie library in Calgary. Fifers that were made famous. Daniel Defoe, when he wrote Robinson Crusoe, apparently based the character on Alexander Selkirk, who was a sailor who came from Fife. But the most famous of all that you all know is Sir Sandford Fleming. And Sir Sandford Fleming, he was born in Kirkcaldy. And he was appointed the chief engineer of the Northern Railway, which ran from Toronto to Collingwood. Now, there's a lot of information about this man, and if you want to know more, you go to the depot on 26, and the curator there has done a whole research project. There's a slideshow and so on. He went back to Kirkcaldy, and apparently some people have said to me, oh, I ski with Sir Sandford Fleming's relatives, so they were still here, and that was the connection that brought him up to Collingwood. He did a lot too. He was he created the first Canadian stamp, 3-penny stamp, and he also and I meant to get a slide of this, I forgot. He was instrumental in developing standard time, you know, from the Greenwich Meridian and so on. He did that as well. Very, very clever man. And why not? He came from Kirkcaldy, right? Kirkcaldy is. This is hard to see from here. Okay, where am I? Kirkcaldy is a town on the south coast of Fife, and it has, again, ruins, old buildings, and very modern. Nice harbour here. Who else came from Kirkcaldy? Well, the infamous Scot born in Kirkcaldy was Sheena, Blake, Henderson, Brown, coat of arms.
Woo!
I was born in this small village called Thornton, population 2,000, and these are highland villages. Note how pretty with the mist and the hills and the sea and so on. This was a dreich. We've got very nice descriptive words in Scots. Dreich, dank, dark, miserable, hole in the ground.
That's right.
It derived its name from the thorn tree, and the thorn tree was supposedly in the middle of the village. And these houses, this is the street that I grew up on, and it was, in those days, they have a surface it's called harling, and it's like a stucco, but then they have granite chips in it, you know, to protect the walls from the weather. And they were not whitewashed like this. This is after Margaret Thatcher days, where she allowed people to buy their own homes. Our villagers were all the same. Those were public rental housing. Apart from a few people like the carpenter and plumber who owned their own home, or people who inherited money, we were all the same. We were all Presbyterian, and Catholics here, forgive me, but we weren't allowed to play with Catholics. Not that there were many in the village, but we used to go to Preston Pants with my aunts, and you were not allowed to play with the Catholics. I won't tell you the adjective that was used. Our social economic status was all the same. We spoke the same dialect to each other. In school we had to speak standard English, and believe it or not, that's what I'm speaking right now, standard English. And if you want to get a little bit of a flavour of my dialect, to all the men that come on to me, this is what I tell them: I'm no going home with you the night again. You can ask me later what that is. It's definitely a negative response. Okay, so that was number 17. We calculated number 18 here. Okay. This, I missed something here. Is that church and church?
Thornton.
Got my notes down here. This is it. Okay. This one here. This here's what our village looked like. Now just go back and think of those beautiful scenes in the Highlands with the mist and the little villages and the humpback bridges and so on. Okay, this is what we had. We had 2 coal mines, one on each side. There were big coal seams that ran under the village. So most of the people worked as coal miners or worked on the railways. At one point we had the biggest marshalling yards in Europe right on our doorstep. And if you don't know what a marshalling yard is, it's where the trains are all put together, you know, taken apart and sent off to different parts of Scotland. We had an auction house where the farmers brought in their stock to be sold. And we did have some farming, like around the village there were some nice spots. And so we had all this. This colliery here was opened in 1952 by the Queen. And my uncles were miners, and the old miners said they will never ever take any coal out of that, and it cost a lot of money to build. But the geologist said, oh yeah, we'll get it. And so well, the old miners, I remember my uncle saying, there's a great big underground lake there, and they never could get the coal out because of the water. Yeah. It's trying to tie into the initial, you know, you are the quarry and the rock, your past. Our culture was around the church and the school. We had a very good school. It was very strict. I was always in the corner. I wonder if you could guess why. I didn't have the dunce cap on. And you know, we used to have straps at the front of the desk, and I got strapped a lot. But the difference between what would happen now with a mother and what happened in the past, some mother would come up and say, do you know that Sheena got 7 times strapped today? And my mom said, well, she must have deserved it. You know, that the teacher was that. That was the difference. I have to say that the church was the most amazing place. My dad was the beadle, and if you don't know what the beadle is, the beadle dresses the minister and then goes ahead of him, puts the Bible down and drops the ribbons and so on, goes back and gets the minister and brings him in. While my dad was a real character, and he used to say all kinds of things to us about the minister. So when he came in, and he loved to be action, drama. He was a dramatist, my father. So he'd make a great big production of this, you know, the big high pulpit and so on. But we were giggling in the pews because we knew all the things that he would tell about. This minister was having an affair with this woman in the congregation. My mom cleaned the church, and guess who helped her? 3 of us. And we got different jobs. The one that we used to trade off cookies and everything for was they had a big blue carpet. We had to go on our hands and knees and clean that carpet with a hard brush. So that was our Saturday. But anyway, the good thing about this church is it was full of life. It had cards, beetle drives. You can ask me what a beetle drive is later. It had bus tours, it had concerts, it had shows. There was music and fun and connections right through this. This is a tiny small village. Nobody had cars. Nobody had a car in the street. You took the bus or you took the train. But we had all this culture right in here. The sports we had our own soccer team. We had a curling rink outside the village when it was cold enough. Remember in the lowlands it's not that cold, but it was down below sea level, so they did manage to get some ice. A lot of the guys used to love doing the pigeon racing, but it was down below sea level, so they did manage to get some ice. A lot of the guys used to love doing the pigeon racing. We had a greyhound track, so we had greyhound racing, and we had 2 rivers on each side of the village, so there was a lot of fishing. I think I forgot one. Yeah, the amenities. We had our own golf club, and ladies, I'm a duff golfer, but you know, I used to like to garden, and I would help you always grow vegetables. I'd be in the garden, and the golf club was on, you had to pass my house, way down, a mile outside the village, the railway station and the golf club. And these few ladies, maybe about 4 of them in the village played golf, and they'd come and say, Sheena, get out of that garden and come and play golf. Of course, I didn't want to go. I said, who's going to, you know, it was like a hayfield. Who's going to go and hit a ball around? Well, am I sorry I didn't do that. We had 2 hotels and 7 pubs.
Whoa.
2 fish and chip shops.
Yes.
And we had a park, and the events that took place in this park, and guess what? We had a leisure centre, but it was called the Old Folks Club. and we had the Highland Games, but they did the same thing, ladies. They did all the organisation. It was just, there was always, everybody was included. All these activities there were babies and they were elderly. Everybody was included in all these activities. We had a very, very active lawn bowling club. And we had a cinema. We had 2 shows a week. And we had a Real Women's Club, of course, and that's where all the Robbie Burns events took place. 22. This, on the left, is my last, well, I do have a townhouse in Burlington, but this was my last big home in Burlington. And this home was about, you don't see it from the back, it was about 4,000 square feet. And I don't know if you can see a resemblance, but you know what I mean? Like there is some kind of resemblance. The only difference is that this would be less than 4,000 square feet and there were 4 families. This was our flat here on the top. There were 4 flats. I don't know where the people slept here. They were called the Huttons and there were at least 6 boys.
Whoa.
So they had 2 bedrooms. I don't know where they slept. Couldn't figure that out yet. This must have missed a one there. Oh, here's the thing about me. You know, I sometimes wait for people at the snowshoe trail or the walking. Only once have I been by myself on a preview hike. And I'm there and I'm thinking, well, it's raining, I know why they're not coming. You know, it's snowing, I know why they're not coming. It's windy, I know why they're not coming. The roads are bad, I know why they're not coming. Well, you know, what happened here was you were never allowed to be indoors. You just went in to sleep and to eat because the homes were too small. We had my dad used to go and get we had quite a big backyard here, and you used to go and get an old hen house and clean it out and put it there, and then that's where you play on a rainy day. If it was really, really pouring or really cold, they might let you inside. We had no car, so we had to walk everywhere. We had no phone, and because we were close quarters, you just lived each other's lives. And Mum was just a wonderful mother, and when she would say she was taking us to the beach, it would be us and like 12 others. She was always dragging somebody along with her. I think I've missed out one here. This is my family. This is Mum and Dad and the 3 of us, Trip, Chat and Toe. Guess where I came in the order of things. I was the eldest, and everything, Sheena, you're really bossy. Well, you know what, Mum would get us ready. She always, I don't know where she got the money to dress us so immaculately, and she'd get us ready, then she'd say, now you're clean, and then here's the next one, you keep her clean, and the next one till I get myself dressed here. This is my brother-in-law. He was the guy next door, and my sister and brother, they live in Ohio now. My dad was a butcher. And he was in the Second World War. He was a prisoner of war for 5 years. He was caught just before Dunkirk. Churchill sacrificed the 51st Highland Division to encourage the French to fight. And they did. 1 battalion escaped. They were taken prisoners. He was a butcher in the service corps, and so they, you know, they had 1 rifle between 7 of them or whatever. I mean, they weren't really trained to fight. And so, but the one thing, my dad didn't really talk about negative experiences. The one thing that he brought from the war was, he said, I mean, there was all kinds of men came through this camp. He was on the Polish-German border. It was a hard labor camp. Fortunately for him, he saved the farm manager's son from drowning. My dad couldn't swim, but he could doggy paddle, you know, going to in the 2 burns beside our village. And so he saved him from drowning in the reservoir, so they gave him the best job, which was looking after the Clydesdale horses. So that was his job. But you know, it was kind of brutal. The one thing though that he brought back from that was, he said, what distinguished men were their education. And so from then on, he promoted and worked at helping us to better ourselves. Mum was a stay-at-home mum, Dad was a Victorian father, and Mum provided unconditional love. She was a beautiful woman. I have to say, I've got my dad's personality, and my 2 sisters are so quiet.
Don't mess with me.
No. These are my mom was one of 13. I knew 10 that lived, two males and the rest females. My dad was one of 8. And we all lived between 2 villages. I mean, I was connected to almost everybody. You could get cousins and second cousins, because my mom was the youngest, and my dad was the youngest. All our memories are of the women. The women were all lovely. Some of them were like my mom, quiet and gentle, refined, and others were like me, unrefined, loved to have fun, loved to drink scotch, and at the least opportunity would do that. We used to walk. The distance between the two, Kinglassie and Thornton, was 7 miles. And any good day we could, Mum walked us along the railway track. There were no trains on a Sunday. And we'd walk along there to the aunts. And whenever we got there, the 2 uncles would take us hill walking, because the women wanted to chat. They wanted to talk. And so I grew up hearing all this talking and all these women. And so if it was a rainy day, we'd play cards, gin rummy, and we'd play dominoes. And you know, we were very poor, we were working poor, but we had such a rich, happy life. And you see this here, this is a picture of the coal man delivering coal. Now in the first house I showed, we had 2 houses in Thornton. The first house I showed you, we lived upstairs. Your coal bin was in the middle of the house. So that coal man would bring that up, and can you imagine the dust that would happen from doing that? And of course it was a real status symbol if you had your coal bin outside.
Oh yeah, we had it outside. Goodies.
My music's always been part of my life. On my dad's side, my Uncle Donald had a one-man band. He had an accordion, a mouth organ, and he was the most beautiful tenor singer, but he wouldn't go out and sing. He would only do it for family gatherings. My uncles, the 2 uncles, they were coal miners, and most mines had a colliery pipe band. This is my Uncle David in 1938. He was drum major champion of the world, colliery class.
Wow.
After leaving the village, well, not leaving the village, leaving school in the village, I went to Kirkcaldy High School here in the next town. And I played field hockey 5 times a week, and that's how I can at least hit the golf ball. And then I went to Dundee College of Education to become a teacher. Actually, when I left school, my best subject was math and physics, and my dad got me a job in the coal mines in Kirkcaldy as a lab technician. But just at the end of the equivalent to your grade 13, I was asked, because I was house captain we had these different houses, so I was house captain of St. Serves. They asked me if I'd like to go to a summer camp for underprivileged children. And the teachers there said I was a natural teacher. And so they helped me make a late application. So I ended up not in the mine, in the labs in the mine, but in Teachers College. And then in 1969, my sister Faye was doing medicine at Edinburgh University, met a young architect from Transcona, Winnipeg, who persuaded me to apply for a job in Canada. And so I did. So in 1969, I came out on the Empress of Canada. This is Sheena, 23 years old. We set up from Liverpool and ended up in Montreal. I think that in our village, when I've gone home on trips and I ask, about people in my class and people in our school, there was an extraordinary percentage of people who did very well. And we've always talked in the family about why this was. And the African saying, it takes a village, to bring up a child. That's what happened in there. I mean, we've lost that here, haven't we? Like, everybody was involved. If I drank out of a flask, having a little tattoo, my dad knew the next day. If I went to choir practice and misbehaved on the bus, my dad knew the next day, and of course there were repercussions for that. I think the church united us. We had stacks of Bibles for perfect attendance there, and I think from humble beginnings, our neighbour was George Sharp. He was a railway driver, and he became Sir George Sharp, and he was knighted with an OBE, and that's the where you could go in Fife. I feel that that part 2 of my life is a bit X-rated, as girls kind of tend to tell you.
I love it. Oh, I want to hear that. Yeah.
And you know, I went
Another day.
home near the end of the last visit. The last time I went home, and there was a cousin had an anniversary, and you know, every Scottish evening finishes with a ceilidh. And there's a part that's called From the Floor. So the MC just says From the Floor. And you just stand up and you like to tell a story or a poem or a song or a joke or whatever. Or if you've got your instrument with you, your accordion or whatever, then you do that, you know. And at that, I stood up. I did have a few scotches. But guess what I sang? My country is, I haven't got the voice for this now. I'm going to take singing lessons this year to get my voice back. My country is my cathedral, the northern sky its dome. I'm going to cry. They all call it Canada, but I call it home. The people beyond the borders and far across the foam. They all call it Canada, but I call it home. Anyhow, that night I realized that I wasn't really a Scot anymore, I was a Scots-Canadian. And I have to say that when I go out there and look at the hills, if someone's going to see the Lowland Hills, look at the Blue Mountain and the fields in Beaver Valley, I do feel at home. And I think being part of this Probus is a village, a community to get old in. Do you know about the history of my family? So I thought that what would be really appropriate is a few of these ladies came up and shared it. So I'm going to ask Jackie Sims first to come up and share her connection with Scotland.
You know, I can be a professional weeper.
Professional weeper. You could be a professional weeper.
Well, I want to talk about two Scotsmen, George Brown and my great-grandfather, William, I'm going to be emotional, William Simpson, and their connection to two famous events in Canadian history. Now, everybody probably knows George Brown, a father of Confederation, a Scotsman who emigrated through the United States to Canada, where he founded the Globe, which is now the predecessor to the Globe and Mail. Now, in March 1880, a disgruntled former employee who had been fired for being drunk on the job went in and shot George Brown in his office. Now, George Brown just suffered a slight flesh wound of his thigh, but the wound became infected, and he died 2 months later, having been shot. So he died in May of 1880. His assailant was charged with murder, stood a one-day trial in June, was convicted, hung a month later in July of 1880.
Wow.
Now, that's a little different from our justice system today, isn't it? Is it a swift justice or a swift injustice?
It takes 10 years.
Now, the other Scotsman was my great-grandfather, William Simpson, who lost his leg in an accident as a young boy in Scotland. And because of the accident, he could not work on the farm, so he was educated. And he emigrated with his wife and family and set up trade as a cobbler on the site of what is now Toronto City Hall. In 1884, the CPR was near completion and free land was being offered to open the West. Now, Sir Sanford Fleming also figured in that because he was part of the engineering society that developed the CPR, and it was finished in 1885. So he went west to stake his homestead, and the following year he returned with his wife and family. And he left the train in Whitewood, Saskatchewan, which is very southerly, and they traveled north with ox cart, and I don't know how many kids, but there were 6 in the end. They traveled by ox cart 100 miles to their new homestead, which was just a mud shack. But along the way, I think it was through the Qu'Appelle Valley, my grandfather's brother, who was age about 4, disappeared.
Ooh.
So, happily, the Indians returned him unharmed the next day. But the year 1885, if you remember, is significant because it was the year of the Second Rebellion. And history books say that there was a very brief alliance between the Métis and the Indians, during which there were only a few reported kidnappings. To this day, we do not know if my grandfather's brother was simply wandered off or he was kidnapped. Now, this is part of the family's oral history, but now back to George Brown. Years after the trial, the defense lawyer who represented Brown's murderer spoke in Regina. In recounting the trial, he said that he was convinced that he had won the jury over, but for one stubborn Scotchman, the foreman of the jury.
Really?
My great-grandfather.
I don't have Scotch in here yet. Heather Wintermeyer was very, very excited to come and do it today, and she's sick. So Linda Long has agreed to read out what Heather prepared.
Well, ladies, these are all hard acts to follow. But I think mine is the biggest challenge. You have to pretend I'm Heather. I'll be a little shorter. Just before I start reading Heather's comments, I just have to say what's been on my mind as I listen to all these wonderful stories. It's an amazing book. It's called How the Scots Invented the Modern World. I may have the title not quite right. It is wonderful. It talks about Carnegie and Watt and so many names that we all know who made the modern world. Now, back to Heather Wintermeyer. Heather was born Heather Lang in Halifax, Nova Scotia, 1941, to Thomas Lang and Teresa MacDonald. You'll hear the MacDonald name again. So Heather says, my earliest Canadian ancestor was a Prussian mercenary soldier, Jacob von Horn, who fought under Wolfe in 1756 on the plains of Abraham. For winning the battle, he was given large grants of land around Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. He and his French wife, along with others, walked on snowshoes, who are the snowshoeing ladies here, from Quebec to Nova Scotia.
Oh my God.
There's a challenge for you.
Whoa. No, Sheena. No. No, Sheena. I'm not doing anything.
To claim their land. To become more English, he dropped the Von, becoming Jacob Horn. My grandmother, Catherine, was a Horn descendant and grew up in Dartmouth. She was a school teacher for 6 years when she met and married William MacDonald, a farmer and a prospector for gold. He and his friend Ed Horn, presumably a descendant of Jacob Horn, were prospecting in Labrador and Quebec. Grandfather and some of the other married men came home early. Guess what happened? Ed Horn was a bachelor. He stayed on and found the gold. And the biggest mining company in the world, Noranda Mines, was established in 1907 by Ed Horn.
Wow.
From Enfield, Nova Scotia. However, although grandfather never discovered gold, he knew he had hit the jackpot when he married my grandmother. They had 7 children. She taught them to read and write before they went to school. Here's another theme. She was a firm believer in empowerment through education. When the 2 oldest boys were 15 and 14, grandfather took them to the PC Party headquarters in Halifax and said that if his boys were hired as clerks for the CNR, all of the MacDonalds would vote PC for life and work for the party.
Collusion here, collusion.
Shirley just said nothing has changed. They were hired and sent most of their paychecks home to grandmother. Isn't that nice? With this extra money, the 4 younger children were able to go to college in Halifax. Thanks to my grandmother's passion for education, all of the MacDonald clan prospered and were leaders in their communities. Never slow to miss a business opportunity. When the government was looking for land to build the Halifax International Airport, the MacDonalds put forward the old MacDonald Farm as the only fog-free land in Nova Scotia. Well, it was fog-free until they cut down all the trees to put in the runways, and then the fog came in. When I fly home to Halifax and look down on the old MacDonald Farm, I smile and think of my dear mother's words, Heather, there can never be too many McDonald's.
At the last Red Hat lunch, I was talking, as I was wont to do, and I was talking to Judy Perry, and she told me that she and another Probus member had the same great-grandfather.
That's right.
Here's Mary Wright and Judy Perry.
That's right. They have a two then. Can you believe that? There they were. Cousins.
Some sage person said that ancestors are rather like potatoes, the better part of them are underground. Judy and I are first cousins once removed. Our great-grandfather, she always says, are we that close? Yes, we are that close. Our great-grandfather, John Woodburn Lanier, was born in, I'm not going to pronounce it right, Fairlie Cravash, if that's how you say it, Ayrshire, Scotland, in 1834. And then he immigrated to Picton in 1849. He was 15 years old.
Wow.
And he lived there for quite a while, marrying actually our great-grandmother then, and they had 6 children. Now, the 2 boys, Judy has a different grandfather than I do. Her grandfather, yes. Her grandfather was Woodburn, and mine was John. But anyway, he was a very civic-minded man. He got to be the mayor of Picton, and then he moved into Toronto, and he started the Toronto General Trust Companies because he thought that there was a need for a financial institution like that. In the meantime, I think, just a minute, I have to look this up. He was the first, in 1868, he was appointed as the first provincial inspector of prisons, asylums, and public charities. Then, as I say, he started the Toronto General Trust Companies, which eventually went there, it was dissolved, and went in, I think, first to Canada Permanent, and then to finally the Canada Trust. Eastern Charter too? Well, Judy knows more about this, I should, but anyway, he wrote at the time, when he died in 1915, he wrote, apparently they probated the most complicated will that had ever been probated in Ontario at that time, because owning a trust company, I think he wanted business for it in perpetuity, and he left money in trust to people who weren't even born yet. They just, you know, you think he was a Carnegie or something, he wasn't. And finally, this trust was dissolved, I think, in the 1970s sometime. They changed the Ontario law that when you wrote a will and put it in trust, you could we had to have at least one person of that particular generation alive at the time of the writing of the will. As I say, I think he wanted business for Toronto General Trust Companies. But Judy told me that she got $376. Is that right? I don't remember what I got, but probably more, because there are many more. If you look at the list of descendants, Judy's line is like this from Woodburn, and ours is just about like this. Anyway, two other things that he did, and he was really quite civic-minded. He started the Homewood Sanitarium in Guelph. When I think he was serving as this commissioner of prisons and things, he saw that there was a lot of mental illness, people who were in prison who were really mentally ill instead. So he was instrumental in starting that. And they also, after the American Civil War, they put the railways in the United States, and there was a lot of travel that came to the Niagara Falls area because, one, it was rather phenomenal to look at, and two, there was sort of a feeling that the waters were it was, there was a bit of mysticism that was put forward as far as the waters. I can't say that it was a spa like Baden-Baden or anything, but a lot of people did come to take the waters back in the 19th century. But he felt that the Niagara River should be kept as a beautiful place, not with pop stands and hot dog stands all the way down. So from the start of it at the, where it flows, the Niagara River starts at Lake Erie, all the way down to Niagara-on-the-Lake. He had the province, he and Sir Casimir Zautsky actually, who was a buddy of his, they set aside a strip of land from the bank of the river over, and I can't say how far over, but it became Queen Victoria's Niagara Parks Commission. And that way, they didn't, they had to have permission as to what was being built on this land. And I've noticed actually in the paper recently that there's been some kerfuffle going on about it being an old boys club, and they're putting out tenders and things for the Maid of the Mist without, letting other people in. So I'm sure in his day too it was an old boys club. But anyway, he had 4 wives. He wasn't a bluebeard. 6 of the children, our particular grandfathers, came from the first wife. Then she died. They all died. The second wife had 1 child. I met her actually in Toronto. She was still alive when I came. I grew up in Niagara Falls, and Judy grew up in Toronto. I met this one daughter who was from the second wife, and then the 3rd wife died. They didn't have any children, and the 4th one outlived him. So he was a bit of a, when you read these things, Judy started a book in the genealogy of the family, and then another cousin finished it. So it's a great big thick book like that. It's very interesting. When Mary moved here, and I didn't know exactly who she was, but a friend of ours, we were having dinner just down the street from her, and I asked this certain chap who she was, and she said, "Oh, that's Mary Wright. They ski up the Glen." There goes the light on. So I phoned her up and I said, hi Mary, I'm Judy Perry. She was a little lost for words. Anyway, I told her my maiden name. I said, "You and I share a great grandfather." So then I did tell her who I was, and yeah, we have mutual friends and a sister. Thank you.
I guess I've surprised a few people with some of the things I've said and done today, but I am getting a surprise right now, because there's a group of ladies going to come up and surprise us all, I guess.
They're going to recite each verse, and you have to listen carefully, because I don't know if Charlie was such a darling or not. So. And Charlie, he's my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier. Good.
Now, this is a Robbie Burns song.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's right out of the Robbie.
Right out of the book.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to sing the first. We'll sing the chorus, and then I'll pass this to whoever's doing the first verse.
I am.
Okay.
You said you weren't singing.
No, you can say it. They don't want to sing, so we don't quite know why we're up here. All right, we're going to sing the chorus, and then they'll sing. And Charlie, he's my darling, my darling, my darling. And Charlie, he's my darling, the young cavalier.
'Twas on the Monday morning, right early in the year, that Charlie came to our town, that young cavalier.
And Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. And Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier.
And as he was walking up the street, the city for to view, oh, there he spied a bonny lass, the window looking through.
And Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. And Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier.
Say lights he jimped up the stair and twirled at the pin, and say was ready as hersel to let the laddie in.
And Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier.
We haven't practiced. This is our debut.
He set his Jenny on his knee, all in his Highland dress. For brawly wheel he kenned the way to please a bonny lass.
And Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier.
It's up yon heathery mountain and down yon scraggy glen. We durna gang a milkin for Charlie and his men.
And Charlie is my darling, my darling, my darling. Charlie is my darling, the young cavalier.
Amen.
Before Burley closes the meeting, Tim would like to share just one last poem with you, and then he'll pipe us out. We said after the meeting.
There we go. This is one that I composed myself a few years ago after starting to play the bagpipes. And there is a perennial question comes up over and over again. You find when you take this up as an interest in life, anytime you're out marching and wearing the kilt, somebody comes up and poses the question. Miggs just posed it to me a few minutes ago. And so I recited to her my poetic answer to the perennial question. So it is entitled, Kilty as Charged. It goes, there is in fact one question that's most often posed to pipers. What is the proper dress code once we've passed the age of diapers? Well, suffice to say it's comfortable. In fact, it's liberating and efficiently superior when it comes to urinating. And if your mind's attuned to thoughts familiar to the rabbit, why, the kilt will make it easier to get into the habit. The finest point for young and old who wear the kilt a tartan. It's the sweet releasing freedom of the full, unfiltered fartin'. When Hadrian was on the march, all Europe bowed before him. Then troops outmatched by kilted clans, retreat, they did implore him. The kilted man may walk the world in full unfettered freedom, surrounded by the air so fresh, unlike a well-aged Edom. The flower of Scotland stands so broad it never will be welted, as long as Scotian lassies love their Scotian laddies kilted.
I'd also like to thank Tim for that poem. I think I did that. And we have a bit of business, our 50-50 draw. And Tim, I'd like you to do that. If you would just draw a ticket number here.
I don't have one in here yet.
You're not allowed one. Okay, so this is for half the money today. It's 432-687. It's Isabel. Wonderful, Isabel. Come and receive your another one. Please. Come, Isabel. Oh, that's good. That's good. You don't need to check it. 432-674. 432-674. Judy, oh, wonderful, our social director who's worked so hard. How good is that? And last but not least, this lovely arrangement of Heather. And this goes to 433-742.
God, that's me.
433-742. Oh, John! going to pipe us out.